Good morning and a very warm welcome on behalf of ThinkYoung to this webinar launching the 2021 Thinkathons to talk about young people shaping the digital world. Today, we're going to discuss Generation Z in 2020, impactful and inspiring ways young Europeans harness digital tools to deal with COVID-19. The Thinkathons, which began in 2019, provide young people with a platform to debate our digital future. And next year's editions are going to explore different ways in which the digital world can enable young people to lead better lives and give participants the opportunity to create and pitch their policy recommendations to the policymakers to ensure an inclusive digital world for young consumers. And we're going to kickstart that discussion today by discussing emerging digital global trends, especially in the context of COVID-19, and focus very much on the young consumers' online needs and what needs to be done to optimise that digital transformation and ensure we meet those needs. I'm Jackie Davis. I'll be moderating both of our panels this morning. The first, we're really going to try and identify some of those trends. We're going to talk about the role digital tools have been playing in helping young people to live through the pandemic, the creative use they've been making of those tools, and what all this means for the future. And then in the second, we will turn our focus more to how do we create the best possible policy environment to make sure that it meets their needs. What does all this mean for policymakers? What does it mean for the digital industry, from some of the entrepreneurs and exciting startups we're going to hear from in our discussion? One quick bit of housekeeping before we get underway. If you would like to contribute to the debate, please use the comments box on whatever platform you are watching us through. You can put questions. You can also make comments to what you're hearing. I only have one request, please. Can you make them as brief as possible? Twitter length or even less would be magnificent, so I can see at a glance what it is you want to say and if it's a question, who it's directed to. And if you want to share what you are hearing at this event with the outside world, and please do so, let's get that digital message out. Can you use one of three hashtags, either hashtag Thinkathon, hashtag Gen Z, or hashtag digital? So let me introduce our first set of panelists, and we're going to focus in this one, as I say, on the trends, on what's been happening during COVID, and what are the emerging needs of our young online consumers. I'm delighted to welcome Tiago Guilhem, who is Assistant Policy Officer for Youth and Sport in the Permanent Representation of Portugal to the EU, and of course Portugal moving into the EU presidency hot seat in just a couple of weeks from now. So great to have you with us, Tiago. Ilmari Nalbantolo, who is Deputy Secretary General at the Finnish National Council Alliansi, which hosts about 135 national youth work and educational organisations. We have Kate Morton with us, an entrepreneur and owner of Body Expressive Party Aerobics. She's chair of Dance Express, been busy during lockdown, hasn't been held back by the lack of those physical moments to meet. Alessia Fontanari, who is co-founder of the Italian startup Mappo Tappo, which organises group trips for climbers with a strong focus on sustainability. And again, Alessia has been very busy during lockdown. She'll tell you all about what they've been up to. And last but not least, Andrea Gerosa, founder of ThinkYoung. A very warm welcome to you all. Totally interactive conversation. Going to dive straight in. I've got lots of questions for you all. And Tiago, maybe if I could start with you in terms of the impact that COVID-19 has been having. We've seen people finding very creative solutions to meet together, to socialise, to work, even to fall in love. What is your sense of how the COVID-19 has impacted on enabling people to get through this pandemic and find these creative solutions?
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you to ThinkYoung for this incredible event. And good morning to everyone who is watching us. Well, my first reaction to that question would be the outstanding increase of online content that we have assisted through the social media. Notwithstanding, if you look closely to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, it has reshaped the political, social, and economical landscape. And young people were particularly affected. We were the first ones to drop out the physical school, and we also had loss of jobs, within which most of us were in a precarious situation, and we faced also the disruption of youth mobility and solidarity activities. Therefore, we had to turn to the digital environment in order to fill this education, social, and political gap imposed by the pandemic. I remember to see during the lockdown many young people reaching out to their networks in LinkedIn, for example, to volunteer themselves to revise and update the curriculum of other people. I've seen young people engaging in online classes and workouts. I've seen young people volunteering themselves to help other people and fostering a transgenerational connection, and fostering even more the youth participation in the society.
Thank you. So lots of very positive ways, as you say, that people have been engaging, as well as using very basic tools, the shopping tools and so on. They've actually used them to reach out. The great examples you were giving there. Ilmari, based on your experience and the word coming in from the organizations that are your members, is for you the picture the same? How have you seen what has been happening? And do you think this has been really new trends, new developments, or an acceleration of something that was already happening pre-COVID?
I think it's basically the acceleration of something that has been happening before already, especially here in Finland. The digitalization of the youth work is an essential theme in Finland, especially because we have almost the lowest population density in Finland. So it's not easy to reach out for the young people here in this kind of a country. Of course, it's also a positive thing because that's one reason why we have then been able to develop some new tools and ideas and methods for reaching out young people. But during this COVID time, it has really been a catalyst and sort of accelerator for the digital youth work. For example, we have realized that we have found young people that we didn't know that were existing, really, because there are lots of young people who have, for example, social problems. They don't want to talk to people, not even with a youth worker, and come to this sort of youth house or whatever, because there you also have to talk to someone face to face. But I have really nice stories from young people who say that this is the first time that I'm talking with an adult. It's via Discord or via Snapchat or via Instagram or whatever. But this has happened because the youth work has accelerated its presence in these digital channels.
And interesting, of course, because we're focusing here on Gen Z, we're focusing on young people, but this has revolutionized how we all use digital tools and those means of communication. Kate, from your perspective, and from an entrepreneur's perspective, and I think Body Expressive and all the other organizations, all the other things you do, it's all about connecting, as I understand it, the body, the mind, our emotions, and of course, mental health has been a huge issue during COVID-19. What have you been doing? How have you seen what you do and using digital tools to help address these issues at such a challenging time for many young people?
I think the core discovery, because I mean, online work, obviously, as all of you said, and also online workouts is not a new thing, but living a common emotional experience is a depth that was added to this in incredible way. I mean, some of my classes are dance classes, but all my classes are related to being alive and emotionally connecting. So it's not about steps, but more the way we live the music or live the experience. And to understand for all my members and people from different, because I also have members in different countries, that we can actually live the same emotion and be together, because being together is not only, having a coffee. You can be meet with people and not feel to be with them. The isolation is not only about being in between walls, but being unable to connect and relate to people. And having the deepest way to be, no, I am with other person, because I was living the same, we like to say passion, but it could be sadness, it could be anger, it could be frustration, because you express all of these emotions through your body, was extremely powerful. And I really feel that this is really, that makes you deeply feel I'm not alone, because I participate with my emotion into something that another person in another corner of the world feels exactly the same way. And that's just a layer that I haven't seen before to this extent in my work.
Thank you. We'll come back to some of the ways in which, through your work and others, we can address those issues. But as I say, that common experience, quite unique. Alessia, for you and Mapo Tapo, I think you've been busy, as I understand it. You've organised a crowdfunding campaign. You've produced a travel guide. You've been raising. You've been doing some charity fundraising. For you, how have you seen, for you personally, as a startup, as an entrepreneur, have you seen COVID-19? And more broadly, would you agree with what we've heard about some of the ways both young people have been impacted by digital tools and are using them so creatively?
Yeah, absolutely. And I share a lot what Kate just said. So with Mapo Tapo, we launched Mapo Tapo this year, right before COVID, and it is a startup about group trips. So of course, heavily impacted by COVID, as you can imagine. We were lucky enough to have some windows where at least locally we could test out our concept of group trips about extreme sports. But of course, with the second wave of lockdown coming on, we quickly readapted and decided that this could be an opportunity and not just something to just to suffer. And so what we did, we created a crowdfunding campaign to create a climbing travel guide. So a book, an illustrated guidebook of the 50 best climbing destinations all around the world, with the goal to provide visibility to the areas that are off the beaten track and where the development of this awesome sport, rock climbing, can make a difference for the local community. And what we found that really is unique, I think, of this 2020 is that the online community really came together from all over the world. And we met our fundraising goal in less than 20 hours with people from 38 countries, which is really impressive. We got support from athletes from really all around the world. And I think this resonates a lot with what Kate said, that people want to feel something together. So having a common goal, dreaming together, of a new way of traveling is something that only in 2020 was possible, I think.
Absolutely. That, as you say, bringing people together at all levels globally as well. Andrea, I know you've been doing some research into what young people have been doing and how they've been using those tools. You'll give us some examples of that later. But could I come back to the point that Ilmari was raising about, has this been the start of something very new, or for you, an acceleration of something we were already seeing? Because it strikes me, yes, young people were using that tools, but the creativity we've seen to support each other, to support communities, to find different ways of engaging has been really something quite new and unique, or not?
Absolutely, yes. And quite new, and the positivity behind it. I mean, I think all the four who spoke before me completely get the point. There were plenty of positive examples, plenty of positive stories of young people who saw in this a way to accelerate what you said, a transition to maybe a digital world that we already start getting into. And that helped. And that they saw in a crisis, they saw an opportunity. And young people, one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that they grew up with all this digital world. So they know what it is, it's very familiar for them. It's like for me playing football, because I grew up with a ball on the streets in Italy. It's very typical, no? And this is something that they took the positivity out of it. The four guys all here live are a perfect example. We have plenty of examples later. Next couple of weeks, we will share more examples. And this is something that was only possible because we were all in this together. And that's something that I think we really should underline in a year that was terrible for all of us, for our families. Some of our countries were badly hit, but there has been incredibly positive stories, and that's what we would like to close the year with and look at 2021 with this view.
Absolutely. So as we've been talking about, it's not just been about making what would otherwise have been impossible possible. My favorite thing about the online world is not this. No, this is magnificent, but it's the quarantinis. Drinking with friends from across Europe of an early evening, albeit online, but for me, better than nothing. But I wanted to ask you all, please do indicate if you want to come in. Which of these behaviours will we keep? When the things that were impossible are possible again? Will we just go back to the way we were? Or do you think two things in terms of how we interact with each other, but also Tiago was talking at the beginning about that very positive sentiment of helping communities, reaching out and supporting people. Will that live beyond COVID as well? Kate, you wanted to come in.
Yes, I just want to comment on your first, what you said, which will stay. I can tell you for sure that when people connected emotionally to online classes, the way I'm doing, so making physical experience, also emotional experience, I already see that in between the two lockdowns, a lot of people who normally would be, for instance, going for holidays, classes from holidays, from Christmas. So they actually think now the online is an alternative for when they cannot be in the local studio, which wasn't there before. So I'm 100% sure this is going to stay.
And is that, Kate, going to change your approach as a provider of these services to how you mix and match?
Oh, totally. We're going to stay online forever, ever. I just love it. Totally.
I agree with
where they are, even if they went for, holidays, like for sure.
Tiago, we're going to stay living like this forever now, do you think? Do you love it?
No, absolutely not. We're not going to stay living behind the virtual scene as we are living right now. We need the social contact. We need the physical presence. We need that physical presence to foster the solidarity activities and the youth mobility we young people are used to. But mainly the virtual thing that will remain, it will be the use of the digital to see and to talk with our friends, our family. I myself, I have my family very far away, like nearby Australia in Timor-Leste. So I use the digital world to connect with them and to stay connected. And that's one thing that will certainly stay in our daily lives.
Other thoughts on this, Ilmari? Do you think which bits will stay and which bits will go?
Well, I think that there can be surprising positive things that will stay. For example, as Tiago a bit referred to, I guess many people are already, how to say it, a bit not really content, but a bit fed up with all that every meeting and everything is just digital. I mean, people are really missing the social contact, and this can be also positive to think, because at some day this will end, and then we will be back in like meeting each other face to face, and maybe then people will also appreciate these face to face contacts more, and the sense of communality that, for example, is created in workplaces and in youth clubs and in whatever community you are part of. So this might be one like surprising positive issue. But then in the usage of digital tools, there will definitely be positive things that will remain. For example, one is that what Kate was sort of referring to, that the sort of supply of different kind of hobbies and activities that can be also they can be, you can go to these activities online as well as in a place. So this will be like really positive issue in the future as well.
Kate wanted to jump in, and then I'll come to Alessia and Andrea.
I just want to clarify. So for me, it's like as a complementation, because we do in the lockdown, we do online classes and we stream them. Live classes. So I have crowd in front of me and I have girls connecting to me online at the same time. And sometimes I even turn the camera so people see the crowd in the home. So for me, it's just alternative. It's not going to replace it. But now you don't think if you stop your activity locally, you're cut out. You have a chance to still connect if you feel like it. This is what was my point.
Yeah.
And also, can I just quickly add that my dream is that this will also enhance the international aspect of young people's lives, because if you can be part of a hobby that was organized in your city via online, you can also be part of a hobby that is organized in, I don't know, in Australia or whatever. So I guess more and more people will find these new opportunities, and this will enhance our way to communicate.
Absolutely. Alessia,
over
climbing
borders.
is obviously a physical activity, obviously something where you need to get together. But do you see this online world and the things you've been doing in the online world continuing post-COVID? Has it made you think, okay, you were new, as you say, you started, but worst possible timing, just before COVID hit. It must have been dreadful. I can only imagine how hard it's been. But do you see elements of this now being incorporated into Mapo Tapo that you wouldn't have thought of pre-COVID?
Absolutely, and I think both on our side, but also on our user side. First of all, is the sense of the community, like the idea that you can have a community online, and that more and more people are getting into them and getting involved into online communities. I think it's great, and it's particularly important in our field because we are in very niche sport like rock climbing and surfing and so on. These are growing, but are still very niche. So it's much easier to find a broader community if you go international or if you go like outside your local area. And that's what we try to do, and we did from the beginning with Mapo Tapo, actually surfing the wave of this pandemic, let's say, and we build an online community that is getting more and more active, and we are absolutely happy about that because this is much more than just trips. You know, you have something before, something after, and you can keep it engaged. And what we saw from, let's say, March to now is that there, like in March, there were already people jumping in, you know, conversations online, but they were people that were early adopters, let's say. While now we see that many, many more people, even the ones that really care about physical contact and physical conversation, they are yet now jumping on the conversation, and this is great to see. They are posting pictures, they are less shy, and they see it as a community and not just you know, as a some places to scroll pictures. So this is, I think, a great takeaway from all these 2020.
Absolutely, and I want to come to what needs we're identifying through all of this and how to meet them in a moment. But Andrea, I know, as I mentioned earlier, this research you've been doing on what people have been doing during COVID-19, and you said you think it's an acceleration of a trend. But do you get a sense from your research of the degree to which these new behaviours will stick, will last, and the degree to which we'll say, hallelujah, we have a vaccine, we can go back to how we were, forget the digital world? Now, as you say, the younger generations have always used it, but these creative ways of using it, do you think people will continue to be so creative?
Well, I mean, it's a $10 million question, and trying to predict the future, you usually get it wrong. But I think it's going to be, as usually, a middle way between two things. There is a new word that it's happening a lot in a lot of industry, like real estate, which is very physical, hybrid models. And everybody talks about hybrid models. So they will put technology into the climbing company of Alessia. We'll put more technology into what Kate is doing, more technology into politics. I think there are a few things we know for sure, is that the one who are seeing the opportunity are enlarging their market or their talent pool or their opportunities. We as an organization, we can hire people now everywhere in the world. You don't just need to be based in Brussels or Geneva or Nairobi where we have the offices, because we saw that it can work. And policymaker, I think one thing for sure is that it will not be policymaker or politician who will decide what will it be. It will be young people mainly because they're a driving force, but in general, the citizen, the consumer, who will decide, you know, what's going to be next and how often they're going to travel and how often they're going to go to an office. And the only thing that this year proved is that it's possible, is that there are creative ways, positive creative ways. Ilmari, we were having a chat for an hour last week. As he says, a lot of rural people who live in rural areas, excluded from society, always been excluded from society, through this year, they saw they could be part of society, thanks to technology, thanks to the digital world, thanks to a lot of things. So, for many people, really has been something positive. When a lot of elderly who now can use video conferencing and to call their nephews because they cannot meet them anymore. So it was forcing on them. And I think it's going to be a middle way. And I liked a lot the word hybrid, because that's really, people needs to meet and talk, as Thiago said. At a certain point, you want a hug.
Okay.
But yeah.
So we have a question from the audience from Marilena Tumazu, who says, how can we ensure, and it links to what we're talking about now, the consistency of use of digital tools even after the crisis is over? But another one from Charles Howard saying, how can we predict and respond to the potential negative implications of increased digitalization? Is there a way to ensure the positives are experienced by as many people as possible? And Ilmari, I know you have to leave us a little bit early from this conversation, but that really brings me to my question about so how do we ensure that we keep these positives? But on the downside, do you think that young people, I know one of the things your organization does is it works on youth participation in decision making. Do you think young people are being engaged enough in this conversation about, and we're going to focus on it more in the second session, about the policy environment, what regulation is or isn't needed, should it be a free-for-all, what do we need to do? Is that conversation about the upsides and downsides and what we need to do being had enough with young people, and how do we mitigate those potential downsides?
I think there is, at least in Finland, there is enough conversation actually, because, you always have to participate as much as possible, the young people, in discussions that concern their own future. But then again, I think that we also have to give the young people the opportunity. The people who are not so young anymore, we have to give the young people the opportunity to sort of take the floor, if you understand what I mean. I mean, we can't always just like pull them in, but because that's also something that passivates people. You also have to give them the opportunity to take the floor themselves. So there has to be a balance of giving the opportunities and giving the opportunity to take the floor yourself.
Thank you very much. And Ilmari, I know you're going to slip away from us in a moment, but we are very grateful to you for joining us today. Just in terms of what we need to do for the future, I know it's hard to imagine because people are being very creative with the tools we have. But have you, through the work you're doing, have you identified areas where there are gaps? We don't have the tools we need, or we don't have the enabling environment that we're going to need in the future? Or do you think this is a very organic thing? It will just happen. I mean, for you, Kate, are you developing new tools, new apps, new ways of working? And if you are, is there anything holding you back from a regulatory perspective, or anything you think needs to be addressed to enable you to ride this wave?
I mean, I think from my perspective, we do, there is a lot of work on softwares in behind. So that's something a bit boring to talk about, but to automatize the technology, digital part of the game. Because before, when you go to the studio, you have different behaviors and you want to have it user friendly. So experience is nice. It's one thing, but all the service around us, that it's easy as you buy the bread. It's something that we had to build around. So that's something that we didn't talk about here. And it's a big piece of it, if not the biggest. But if it comes to gaps, I will tell it from the human perspective. I just probably think that I am getting on board because we are on mission to also like counter, mental health issues. All people that just simply have access to the skills, how to use digital media and have enough confidence. And obviously, I must miss a lot of people who, first of all, mentally feel shy to do that. So they need encouragement and they just simply lack tools. Because if you have an HD camera and you don't have HD camera, this is, whether you want it or not, influence the way you are seen and you see someone. And if this is your only connection, that can actually just clearly impact you. It can frustrate you if your camera is bad and you're being excluded because you have no money to pay for the better camera, or it didn't come to your mind. This is very small, but that just exclude or include people, So I think it's as in everything that we do in the world, it's always a question. For my business, it's okay. There are some things that we have to do, but to get more people on board and be sure that more people are benefits who need it, from the service. It's a question of inclusiveness.
Okay, there are two questions which sort of two sides of the coin. One asking about, from Guillem Tosca Diaz, saying about the emotional side of virtual socializing. To what extent do you feel we are able to obtain positive feelings from virtual socializing? You talked there, Kate, about some of the frustrations sometimes because your connection's no good or whatever. And then somebody else saying, how easy will it be to go back to normal post-pandemic? Have we now got so used to living in this technological world where we don't leave our houses, where we socialize, that actually it will be quite hard? So those are the two sides. And then we have two questions about education I'd like to come to. But Tiago, it's an interesting one, isn't it? We have the sort of the positives, but have we all got so used to this that when we are able to meet physically, there's going to be a certain hesitancy, having done this for so long? Or do you think actually people will just go, yes, it's over, and rush out again? And Alice here after that.
I think it will all depend on our availability and to balance the physical world and the virtual world. But let me raise your attention to some of the challenges that the digitalization brought to us, namely the increase of non-democratic tendencies across Europe that rise through this misinformation that we see nowadays through the virtual world. In that sense, I do believe we as young people have enormous impact in influencing this and fighting this disinformation. We need to act as agents of change, because we acknowledge ourselves as fighting racial, ethnic, gender inequalities, and also the fighting for the environment. Those are really impacting the way that young people see the society. In that sense, we need to act like agents of change to tackle misinformation, to reach out to people with less opportunities in rural areas, as Andrea was saying, and to foster a sense of good information through the whole society.
And that links to the education question. We'll come back to that in a minute. But Alessia, I think you wanted to come in briefly, if you would, because before you all go, I want to put you on the spot. Alessia.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick comment on this last point by Tiago. This is precisely what we saw with our crowdfunding campaign for the book, The Climate Travel Guide, because what we wanted to promote with the book is to give visibility and to these rural areas all around the world where the development of the sport can make a difference. And we saw a lot of attention, a lot of people getting together and getting excited about this. So I totally resonate with you.
Very good.
And then
yeah. Go on.
No, no, I wanted to share. Like, we saw a little sneak peek of how is it to get back to normality in September and October, at least within Italy. And from our experience in our trips, what we saw is that people were really eager to get together, but in smaller groups and away from the crowd. So that's
just on the education point, and I don't know who can pick up on that. We've had two questions, one from Mario Bobbio and one from Julia Crumier, who says, the pandemic has had a very strong impact on education for a young generation. Do you think digital education, apps, Zoom classes, and so on will disappear when the pandemic is over? Or again, and Andrea, maybe come back to you because I see you nodding, brief one if you would, are we going to keep some of these digital education tools for the foreseeable?
We must keep them. And then I want to let the other reply, because I have another 40 minutes in the next panel. But I think we must keep them. And I think it was great for teachers to be forced. I have a friend of mine who's a teacher in high school, and he said, I'm 37, I can use this kind of things. But plenty of teachers in the 50s and 60s that were forced to learn digital tools that they needed to use even before the pandemic. They just didn't use them. And I think this was important for them to learn this, but also to spot the families where young people don't have access to digital tools. That was kind of an unstructured census, or who is in need out there. Absolutely. And which families we need to go and help out so that kids are connected, because being connected today change your life.
Thank you.
And if you're not connected, you're outside.
Yeah. Ilmari, you wanted to come in, a brief one if you would, sir.
Yes, I think that if we keep the digital tools in the education, that'll ensure that the children will be equipped for the future that is unseeable at the moment, because that'll equip them for the change, because they have to change themselves with the digital tools. So the most important thing is to equip children for the unforeseeable future.
Absolutely. Okay, we are almost out of time, but I want to put you all on the spot, and I'm going to go in the reverse order to my first question. So I'm going to start with Alessia, then to Kate, and then I'm delighted we still got you with us, Ilmari, to you and Tiago. Andrea, I'm going to leave for now because we're going to hear from him again later. But Alessia, I'm going to put you in charge of EU policy, digital policy, for one day. You can do one thing, because you're in charge for a day, to make sure that we really do seize all the positives that have come out of COVID-19 in terms of the way young people have been using them, that we've been discussing, and meet their needs and mitigate any possible negatives. You're in charge for one day. In a sentence or two, what are you going to do and why?
Well, as we discussed before, I will definitely focus on the more remote areas and make sure that there is access to good internet and connectivity, because now we all realize it is essential, and not just to be connected, but also to enable more sustainable way of working or of living away from the urban cities, closer to your hobbies and closer to your loved ones. So this would be at the core, I think, of my one-day policy.
Very good, very good. Kate, you're in charge. What are you going to do?
So definitely 100% what was said previously, but also apart from this, making a program to create skills of service providers, because there is a lot of businesses that went out and a lot of teachers that just could not know how to passionately and engagingly teach online. And I think this is a big gap that has to be filling as well. You know, I am from media, so I know how to do this, but a lot of dance schools or other things didn't simply know, and they collapsed. So that has to also be countered.
Thank you very much. Ilmari, you're in charge.
Maybe a program for those people who are in challenging positions in the society, so those who are poorer or in the rural areas or disabled or somehow, because we have to include everyone in the change.
Thank you very much. And Tiago, of course, Portugal moving into the hot seat, being in charge, running EU business for 6 months from January. But for you, I'm going to elevate you. I'm going to make you could be president of any EU institution you like for a day. Don't tell the bosses. What are you going to do with that one day in charge?
Well, mainly tackle data protection, disinformation, and education. Complement formal education by physical and virtual settings, and also tackle and elevate education through non-formal and informal education and learning, and promote the participation of young people, reaching out to every young people. Like our main priorities as upcoming Portuguese presidency of the European Union for the youth sector, it will be strengthening the multi-level governance when promoting the young people participation in society. So we'll be focusing on young people participation and engagement in society. Thank you.
And on that note, I just want to thank you all very much with your positivity, with your commitment. I can see that we're going to keep all the benefits of what's happened over the last night. And it is great, Andrea. Thank you for us being here, focusing on some of the positives out of COVID, when inevitably, of course, we have to focus so often on the devastating social and economic impact. So thank you so much to you all. We're going to come back in our second panel to talk about some of the consequences of this. We began to touch on them, and Tiago there in terms of the presidency. What does all this mean for the future? What do we need to do? What does it mean for the digital industry? What does it mean for people like Alessia and Kate, startups and entrepreneurs what does it mean for the policymakers? But panel, the audience can't thank you in the traditional manner, so I like to bring the physical world in, and I'm going to do it for them. Andrea, do you want to say something?
Yes, Jackie, just because, I have a soft spot for entrepreneurs. Anyone who's watching us, you can find on our social media the contact of Kate Company and Alessia Company. So if you are into online classes or climbing in the most remote and beautiful area of the world, go find them on our social media, click, and as soon as you can, support them.
Looking forward.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you very much. And if I could
Thank
ask
you, guys.
you to leave the studio, click on that button at the bottom so that I can let our second panel in. It's been great having you with us. Thank you very much. Andrea, while we are waiting for our second panel to join us, I mentioned earlier the research you've been doing into how young people have been using these digital tools. We heard some great examples there from our panel, but you also have some best practices. You've done some case studies, looked at some out-of-the-box initiatives. Can you take us on a whistle-stop tour through some of the examples you found?
Yes, absolutely. So you will see coming up, wow, that's beautiful. So the people in the background definitely can see us. The title is quite straightforward, Millennials and Gen Z in Europe, 9 impactful and inspiring ways young European harness digital tools to deal with COVID-19. So positive example. The first one, probably the one that most of you saw on your social media. There were 2 teenagers, 12 and 13 years old from Italy. They love tennis. They couldn't leave their house. They decided to play tennis on the rooftop. It went viral. 20 million people saw it. Roger Federer went visit them and played tennis with them on the rooftop. That was really brilliant. The second example becomes a bit less fun and creative, but definitely more impactful from a societal point of view. Easy Peasy. It's a platform that empowers parents to educate kids during lockdown. And again, digital world that helped people that before didn't know how to use it to make sure the kids could keep on their education. And as we spoke before, education was really dramatically hit during the lockdown. The third example, it comes from a teenager. He started a platform where volunteers could help people in need, especially the elderly. And again, started from a teenager. This was in Sweden, but we'll see more example later. Another platform that helped a lot, and it was easy to start, and it was easily pick up. The fourth one, and I'm trying to go as fast as possible, and as I said, there will be more published in the coming weeks. There is a young Norwegian entrepreneur who created a one-button computer where old people and elderly can talk to their nephew and grandnephew, the one who don't have access maybe to technology or don't know how to use it. And she sold over 2,500 in the first couple of months of this being up. And the fifth one, if we can move on, this one was very important. This is a young kid, a young boy who initiated a global art project. 250 artists got involved. They were fundraising for NHS, big impact, a lot of money fundraised. And art, we'll see later, it's one of the, again, industry that got most hit. And on the other side was quickly able to change. The next one, please, is again art. So this was a theater, and all this industry has been dramatically hit. A lot of people lost their job. The student in Serbia said, why don't we move everything online? 11 European academies joined. There was an online theater festival, many people participating, and again, something where technology helped and digital world helped. And the next one, please. This is nice. This is fun to watch. Links a bit to the first one. The 3 kids from the UK, they persuade the public to stay at home by basically recreating the song live and direct from famous English rapper. And it's called The Homeschool Champs. You can go Google it. Went viral again. And it's nice to see also how teenager, and as Ilmari said, young people who before didn't have, let's say, visibility, now they can have it. And now we get to the last couple of one, and then we can start. This is a platform in Belgium, so probably many of you have heard of it. 7,000 volunteers helped 800 isolated people, as we were saying before, rural areas very badly hit, and 7,000 volunteers through this platform, which is called covidsolidarity.org, were able to help people in need in Belgium. And the last one is a non-European, but it deserved to be there. This is the first teenager who started mapping COVID-19 back in December. And his website is currently used by many people to update numbers. Over 2.5 million visitors a day, huge success story. He started mapping protest now with a new project with the MIT. So again, teenagers taking the lead thanks to the digital tools.
Thank you very much indeed, Andreas. Inspiring stuff. Some great examples there. And as you said, more to come in the coming days and weeks. I'm delighted now to welcome our second panel this morning, joining Andrea and I, Ricardo Castanera, who is Councillor for Digital and Technology in the Portuguese Permanent Representation. Ricardo, we've already begun to talk about the Portuguese presidency coming up, your time at the helm of EU business for the next 6 months, starting in January. We'll come back on some of the things that will be done in this area and some of the challenges as you see them. Very delighted to welcome Svetlana Penkova, MEP. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I hope not. A member of the European Parliament. She's on, among other things, its Industry, Research and Energy Committee, and she's a member of the EU40 network. So great to have you with us. Thank you so much. And Nadia Necheva, who is co-founder of Tivisto.it, which is a digital health platform, as I understand it, created since the pandemic began to enable teleconsultations between doctors and patients. So great to have you all with us. Let's jump straight in. We heard lots of stories, not just there from Andrea about some of the research ThinkYoung has done, but from our first panel, we heard from a couple of entrepreneurs who've been doing some fantastic things. Their work was not obviously something that could move online. It did. We've talked very much about not just how digital helped people to do things that otherwise would have been impossible in lockdown, but also very positive, creative stories about reaching out, bringing communities together and so on. So I just wanted to start by getting your sense of where we are now. And Ricardo, maybe start with you in terms of the impact that COVID has had, and the big question we talked about, and I think Andrea described it as the $64 million question. How much of this new behavior do you think is going to stay with us once the pandemic is over? Have these behaviors changed forever? Where are we most likely to do things permanently differently, if I can put it that way? Same question to you all. Ricardo.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. It's absolutely amazing, the projects that you've just shown. And for sure, there are many others. I would like to stress the idea that the COVID crisis accelerated the digital transition by many years. And suddenly, we are all quite forced to move into the online world, not just for work, study, shopping, socializing. It was and it still is a big change. Although this forced change brought some risks, it's important also to note not just the positive side, because there is also a dark side of the moon all the time. We are seeing that, for example, more illegal, more harmful activities online, and then we can talk a little bit more about that. But a lot of benefits. And for example, many barriers to teleworking, to teleschool were completely torn away, and many new tools emerged to make this easier. And some projects, as Andrea just came up with. Nevertheless, I believe that the human experience cannot happen only in the online world. This is a very important message. We still need to have the physical contact with other people. I think that after the pandemic is over, and we all wish that it's over really soon, we will still use the online tools as we are using right now, but I hope that in a more balanced way. Companies, universities, individuals that are now living, I would say, all day long on an online way. It will continue in somehow, but it cannot be entirely as it has been in the past now.
Indeed not. Yeah. So the question I want to come back to, Ricardo, a bit later is, what does that mean in terms of the environment, the policy environment, how we meet the new needs and challenges, and as you said, also how we meet that, what you call the dark side of the moon. But Svetlana Penkova, let me come to you in terms of, would you agree with Ricardo, who's really saying what we've seen is an acceleration of something that was happening already. But we've also heard from lots of our speakers and those examples Andrea gave of things that weren't happening at all. Ways in which digital tools have been used amazingly creatively to cope with the specific challenge of COVID. That we might say, okay, the world's gone back to normal, so some of those community outreach, social projects and so on, we don't need. How do you see the future? Are we going to keep a lot of these positives and creativity that we've had? And what do you think that means for meeting the needs of young millennials?
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you so much for having me here, this conversation. The first part was extremely interesting in terms of all the innovative projects and the examples that were presented. So I definitely agree to the aspect which says that the innovation had boosted dramatically. Like we're discussing, for instance, currently Parliament, the artificial intelligence and the regulation concerning that path. And from what the experts are saying is that that type of technology, for instance, jumped by years in terms of what has been happening in the past few months, just because the creativity had boosted the development so quickly into everything. And of course, the young people and the millennials have a crucial role to play here, because they're very quickly adapting to all those changes. They're quite reactive in a positive way and very innovative. And we've seen that in many examples all across Europe. But as a member of parliament and the regulatory side, I have to point out that we need to be cautious on regulating that quick development. What we've seen in the past, and it's quite more obvious now, is that technology and innovation can move much faster than the regulatory framework. And those are some of the main topics of discussions we're having now, especially in the Industry Research and Innovation Committee, where we're discussing how can we move quickly, because the needs currently, the needs of the education system and the need of the job market are quite obvious in terms of the technology is already part of that. And now we need to make sure that it is being done in a collaborative way among all the European countries, and it's being done in a way that we protect the users. Because Ricardo already kind of mentioned the fact that sometimes everything is online now. Yes, everyone has access to a lot of things that were probably not even considered in the past, but we need to be cautious on the harmful content that is out there. So this is very interesting and important balance, and those conversations like the one we're having now are very helpful for us in order for us to be able to move quickly.
So there's the essence of the dilemma. We really want to foster this innovation, this creativity, don't want to hold it back through regulation, which, as you say, tends to move slower, but also keep those protections. How we get that balance, question for our discussion, I hope. But Nadia, tell me a little bit more about your digital platform, how you developed it, and do you expect in future, will we go back to the traditional way we always saw our doctors face-to-face and as it was, or do you think something has changed in the teleconsultation world forever?
Well, that's a very good question. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to share our experience in this field. And in my opinion, what happened this year is not that we had a fundamental change, but basically we had a giant spotlight pointing right directly towards digital options, which means that things that were already there suddenly became extremely popular. So in our example, for example, we started Doctors in Italy a couple of years ago, and this year we had launched a nationwide platform helping travelers find a doctor in a medical office or for a house call. It was going, of course, very well until travelers stopped traveling. Then we figured out, okay, what can we do with the same logic, with the same approach, and with the same tools? And that's how we decided to use our network of doctors and our technology to offer video consultations and to offer them not only to travelers and expats and international students, but also to Italian patients. That's why we launched TVisito in April. And TVisito is a platform that's only dedicated to video consultations. So patients can only book a a video appointment with a doctor. And the idea is that people who started using it during the pandemic and the lockdown had a chance to experience a different way of seeing a doctor. And it's definitely not a substitute. So it's not going to substitute ever the in-person consultations, the relationship with the physician, and the possibility of being examined. But it's a complement, and it takes care of one part of healthcare, which can be easily and effectively delivered online. So in some cases, it might actually be more effective for the doctor and for the patient to see each other online. For example, the classical example everyone talks about is for follow-up consultations and regular checks for patients with chronic diseases. And this is a large part of the patients' population in the world, and they need regular appointments with the doctors. And sometimes, especially if we think, for example, of elderly patients who need assistance in traveling and commuting to the doctor's office, they may not get enough assistance because they don't want to commute. So we really need to have systems that allow them to be assisted from home, so from where they are. So what we build, oddly enough, is a platform that is built with in mind young generation, so Generation Z. So it's a young tool. It has a user experience that is focused on young people, but we tested it with geriatric patients. So when we launched, we used it first with the elderly and with the National Association in Italy of Geriatric Medicine. So we had doctors use it with elderly patients to make sure that everyone is able to use it effectively and securely. And as you mentioned, I agree fully that it's important to find a way to regulate these experiences, because of course, in the emergency, we all jumped into assisting patients, and a lot of doctors gave their direct phone number to their patients, and they have been using emails, WhatsApp, whatnot, to be in touch, because the most important thing was to be in touch.
Yeah.
But this doesn't mean that in the long term we can sacrifice privacy of the patients and quality of the data. So right now we will have to build what will be the next step. So having infrastructure and having systems that are specifically dedicated to this.
Thank you very much. Lots to come back to in our discussion. And you raising there the question of the skills, the ability to use things. We had a comment when I was asking our last panel for their key priority for the future, what they would do with their day in charge. Also, the question of service provider skills came up. You already had some skills. You reapplied them to something a bit different. I'd be interested to know, particularly from a policy perspective, Riccardo and Svetlana, how you see the skills issue here, because obviously there is also a risk that some people get left out, not generally among young people for skills reasons, but perhaps access to technology. So how do we deal with that? But Andrea, very much describing there, Nadia, this hybrid that you were talking about. She says, it's not a substitute, it's a complement. What for you is the key from a policy perspective to getting this balance right between fostering, encouraging, enabling all this creativity that we've been seeing, but also dealing with some of the issues around protection of young users and that darker side that Riccardo was talking about? How do you see getting that balance? Same question to all of you, but Andrea.
Well, I mean, it's a very thin line, and now we have policymakers, so we're talking to them, but I think it's the same challenge that startups have, and the same challenge that managers have, and foundations have when they do program. How do you find the right balance between what you want to have an impact on, and how do you let things grow out of their own? And I was watching yesterday a video celebrate 10 years. So what happened in 2010? Instagram was started in 2010. 10 years after, it's probably the most important communication tool ever. How can Svetlana and Riccardo, make a policy today for eventually Nadia's platform being as huge as Instagram in 10 years? It's a very difficult job for the two of them. And one key thing, I think, is more than following maybe the companies, follow the user, follow the consumer. That's what we're trying to do, in our day job with ThinkYoung, spotlight on how people use it. Young people are very well aware, we saw it in the panel before, how to use different platforms when they need it. And easily they switch or they download Nadia's app if they find that that's useful, and easily they delete Nadia's app as they find that it's not useful. And if you try as a policymaker to give the direction, then I think you lose it. You have to see how people use things and follow somehow the consumer, and see that the digital consumer and the young consumer, one are growing now, they are very well aware of how this world is developing. I used the word hybrid in the panel before. I use it again now. I think it's going to be a middle way in the future. We cannot predict the future, but in plenty, I mean, we have done a webinar on the future of workplace. Will people work from home? Will people go to the office? Well, a mix of it. The office will become more a house, like where you go and you really build the team. And there'll still be a physical space, just with some technology behind. So it's really important, I think, for policymakers to understand, to look at how the consumer use things and the young one, and as Nadia proved, also the old one adapt quickly.
Absolutely. Let's not leave us out. Just to say, don't forget, keep your comments coming in. Comments or questions, very welcome. Just use the comment button on whatever platform you're watching us through. But Svetlana, coming back to that question, and you raised it, and I'll ask you as well, Ricardo, and then maybe we'll turn to some of the specifics of what the EU is planning. But this broad question that you raised about this balance, we need to be agile, you need to be fast in order to respond to this world, but you need to protect users as well. How do you see getting that balance right? Svetlana first and then Ricardo.
Perfect. So I will start with something I actually believe is a bit of a misconception, that the millennials or the Generation Z are born with the right digital skills. And we should be thinking a little bit about that. Yes, they are more adaptive and they are quicker to getting used to the new technologies, but we need to emphasize on the right digital skills here. Because this goes back to the question in terms of what abilities we need to teach them in schools and how we need to reform the education system now in order to have the right skills. On one side, being users of that new technology or of the certain apps, for instance, the one that Nadia just presented, which is quite interesting, but also have to have the critical thinking and being able to distinguish what's harmful, what's good, and how they can collaborate and teach even the older generations, which are not that used to the new technologies. So this is going back to schools and actually re-emphasizing on the need of teaching the right digital skills. And here, what could be the example in terms of, like, for instance, promoting more STEM disciplines, which are combining more practical skill sets. In terms of the general European programs, because you did ask in your question a little bit about the specifics we're going to get into afterwards. But for instance, Horizon Europe is something we need to be putting more funding into.
This
just because
research and innovation program. Yeah,
exactly. So I think those are quite useful parts, but we should stop thinking that the younger generation know it all. Yes, they're faster, but we need to help them to have the critical thinking of how to use that. That's the only way to protect the consumers in the future in terms of having a proper use of the digital technologies. And in terms of the first aspects and the access of digital technologies, yes, this is a difficult question. And this is again through funding of the right widespread European programs and not only European as well. This is a matter we've been tackling, and I don't think there is a right solution at the moment. But this has been an obvious problem in every one of the single countries across the world now, especially with the digital education.
Ricardo, you raised this issue of the great positives, but also what you called the dark side of the moon. And we have seen, though, some digital giants saying, you know, if you overdo it on the dark side of the moon, whether it be that, and I'm thinking here about the protection of users, but also in terms of some of the competition issues that the Commission is looking at and so on. If you overdo it, we won't be able to be innovative. We won't be able to be as creative as we can be, and nor will the startups like Nadia. Do you see a risk there that in addressing the darker sides, we hold back the positive? How do you see this balance and the agility and speed we need?
Well, there is always a risk. If you regulate too much, there is a risk. If you don't regulate, there is a big risk. It means that that's the balance that we need to achieve. That's the big question. But what I think is that there is a more urgent notion of the need to ensure the online world is safe and trustworthy. This means upholding the values and rights that we do have in the offline world and put it in the digital world. For the digital natives, it's quite difficult to understand that, but we have that, I would say, task because we cannot live and have parallel universes here, where in the offline world we behave according, for example, to democratic rules, and in the online everything is allowed. I think that this is a very important first point. The second is what can be the policymakers' role here, and is to make sure that the rules and norms are to be respected by citizens, companies, but at the same time to continue or to give the chance for especially young people to freely creating, using, as we saw, strong digital tools for the benefit of all. But I think that it's not just about regulation too. It should be also on top of regulation about information. People should be informed about how emerging technologies work. For example, we talk a lot about AI, but does the young people know how AI works? Does the people know about AI risks? I don't know. I'm not pretty sure about that. And it's very important to know that, and to know and to talk much more about privacy, security online. And that's why digital literacy plays a very important role here. And it's not just for the elderly. Digital literacy, it's also very, very important for the young people too. And last word regarding the digital industry, the way that they should collaborate, they should play, I would say, a much more proactive role, ensuring that their services and products meet by design safety, privacy, and trustworthy expectations.
Nadia, let me ask you very simply, as an entrepreneur, as someone working in this field, frontline, and you've talked about how much difference what you're doing is making, how you adapt it. What do you want from these guys? What do you want from Svetlana, from Ricardo, from policymakers, from politicians to help you in what you're doing? And if I can put it the other way around, what do you actively not want them to do? Is there anything you would say, please don't do this, but we need help in this area? Is there, in your field, are there things they can do and things you don't want them to do?
Absolutely. It's a very good question. I wish I had an easy answer. I think the points that both Svetlana and Ricardo raised are really good. And I absolutely agree on the fact that young people are not necessarily able to understand what they're doing online. And not because they're young, but specifically because they're used to a world where everything is easy and experiences are user-friendly. So they may not even question what's in the back end. So while someone who grew up in the 90s and learned a little bit about what happens behind the software and has read the instructions manuals, maybe understands that this still happens in the back end of everything that's online. So for example, one of the things that I think everyone should learn is a little bit of theory of incentives and always questioning why is something there and why it's easy. Just a silly example. So if there is a new app that makes you add a silly face and make you look younger or older or make you change your face, would you ask yourself why you're giving them this data? Why are they doing it? Because so you have fun? Maybe there's something else behind it. So this requiring from companies to be more transparent about their business model, so would be, in my opinion, very important, because companies are economic entities. So if they're asked to comply with privacy regulations, they do it, they comply. But it's more complicated to ask them to be transparent about how they will earn money from what they're doing, because this is ultimately guiding their actions. So if they earn money from selling data, which could be absolutely a fair way to survive for a company. I'm not saying that's not legal and that's not fair, but if you know that this is what happens behind, then you're aware of what you're doing.
Absolutely.
So that could be something that might be required of everyone.
Andrea, I don't know, brief one if you would, on this question of disinformation and critical thinking. It came up in the last panel, Tiago talked about it, Ricardo was talking about people, do they really understand what artificial intelligence is, what the risks are? Svetlana was saying on skills, it's about the right skills, it's about critical. Have you done much work in this area in terms of young people and disinformation, or is it something you think as part of the Thinkathons next year you're going to have to think about?
Well, we have done some work in this, and definitely next year we're going to tackle again on this, because the whole Thinkathon has this digital theme that we carry on since 2 years and want to go on. So that was before the pandemic, during the pandemic, after the pandemic. I do see. I mean, I'm trying to look at the two panels now. the energetic one before, and the opportunities, and we're going out and we're finding the guys in rural areas that before were not connected. Now they are, thanks to technology. And now we're spotting the kids who don't have a connection at home because they are forced to do education at home. So the first one, the positivity of two entrepreneurs growing, building the app, and adapt to the pandemic when you organize travels. That's a bit of a challenge, no? And now, obviously, with policymakers trying to find, the right balance, which is usually, I think it's the right approach that Riccardo and Sevelina are having. Try to find the right balance. I do have a bit of a different opinion when it comes to the skills itself. I mean, we do have done really a lot of studies in the last 10 years. We've traveled extensively, not just in Europe and every region of Europe. I mean, from north of Greece to South Portugal, to north of Sweden, but also Africa, Asia. Really, the adaptability of young people, even the one that maybe don't have a university degree, it's impressive. And I do understand that we are looking out and seeing data protection, but I mean, I run an NGO, and GDPR had an impact, cost, time, etc., on our organization. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just asking, guys, please have a look at how Nadia can start a company that eventually will employ 10,000 people in 5 years when there's so much papers around.
There are some filters, some questions. I'm linking this to many conversations I've moderated about small businesses generally and the Small Business Act, that filter that says, what impact does this have on a small business, never mind the giants, those sorts of filters. But Riccardo, 2 questions to you. In terms of EU policy in this area, and we're waiting for the digital services and digital markets package next week, I believe we're expecting it now. So Portuguese presidency will have to implement it. What do you think is going to be absolutely key there? And I have a question linking to that from Ulvet Enver saying, as a young person, how can I influence policy on digital technology? So engaging with young people, digital natives on these issues to get that balance right, how important will it be? Sorry to lump 2 questions together, but we don't have very long left. So,
let me start with the second one, because indeed, policymakers take the views of citizens, because that's the way that democratic societies work, and that's our role. And of course, young people, because they are the most enthusiastic, especially on the online world and using the digital tools. So yes, their views are very, very important to take into account, and we receive a lot of feedback and a lot of proposals. But of course, I think that there is a way to move on that specific area, which is we can always improve using the digital tools to get more feedback and more comments from young people. On the regulation or on the regulatory side, the Digital Services Act, which will come up next week on the 15th, it's a very important piece of legislation because it will review, first of all, the e-commerce directive, which has been approved 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, like Andrea said, for example, Instagram didn't exist at all. Facebook didn't exist at all. It means, just to give an idea to our audience, how important it is to make that review. The question is about what will be included in the scope. And the scope, of course, it's about how especially content moderation on the platforms is done. The second question is about if we should tackle illegal content or also harmful content. Then it's about the way that especially the platforms, they behave proactively in order to exactly avoid I would say negative impact of the content that is illegal and that is uploaded.
Key strands of issues. Svetlana, what are you most hoping to see in the proposals that will be unveiled next week? What for you is most important there?
Perfect. So I think we've already covered most of the aspects which we need to know. I would go back to something which Andreas said and try to relate it, and I think Riccardo had just confirmed it. We cannot have a regulation or proposal which is very much customized to a specific platform or program just because they're developing so quickly. And it's impossible for us to have it adapted as fast as the development of the new technologies or the new products coming out. So I think it's of a crucial importance to have it as general as possible, but then tackling the specific matters that we have. And if you allow me to say a few more sentences on that, I've been listening quite carefully, and we've mentioned AI a couple of times. When we're speaking about regulatory framework in AI, we're usually thinking in three areas, which I believe are quite applicable in any digital act regulation, actually. And those areas are the social, the economic, and the ethical aspects. Of course, the ethical one is probably one of the most discussed in AI. But having heard everyone's arguments and concern, I don't see a problem having those three areas in every single digital regulation. Because, of course, we need to have the economic understanding, as Nadia already mentioned. What is this data going to be used? You need to understand how this is going to add economic value to someone who is using your data. We need to have the social aspect to be aware in terms of that not everything could be done only online and completely ignoring the offline communication and the social interaction, and what's going to be the overall impact of that. And of course, the ethical aspect in terms of like proper job creation and having the continuous learning and training of everyone so they can continue to be part of the society. So speaking about those things, they're quite general, but they also have their specifics. Those areas are not to be ignored, any one of them.
Thank you very much indeed, and we look forward to seeing that package next week. We are almost out of time, but I want to put you all on the spot as I did with our last panel, and it's the same question. And we have two policymakers here, so I'm going to, in one case, I'm going to elevate Svetlana to European Parliament President. I'm going to make Ricardo Charles Michel. He's going to take over from the Council President for a day. But Nadia, to you first, and we've talked about the involvement, the influence that you have on policy. So I'm going to put you in charge of EU digital policy for one day. What are you going to do to make sure that you and other startups, other entrepreneurs with all these great creative ideas for using this technology, what's the one thing you're going to do in that day to seize all the benefits and mitigate some of the downsides and protect against some of the downsides we've heard? What would you do with your day in power? Same question to you all. I'm going to go Nadia, Svetlana, Ricardo, and last word to Andrea.
Well, that's a tough question. I don't presume to have an answer. I think I personally would establish two different dedicated teams, one of which would be fully in charge with analyzing consumer trends and where consumers are going. As Andrea was saying before, and I fully agree, if you know what users want, you can regulate that. So you don't have to try to stop a stream, you have to go with the flow and regulate it. And at the same time, I would create a team that's fully dedicated to understanding what companies want and what small businesses, large businesses, where the economic forces of the society will want to go, and then try to regulate that as well, having in mind that it's important that they keep growing and keep having revenues, because of course it would be easy to say, okay, let's forbid them from using our data, but then we wouldn't have a lot of innovation.
Thank you so much. Svetlana, you've changed from your day job as an MEP to being in charge of digital policy for one day. What are you going to do? A couple of sentences, if you would. We're almost out of time.
Perfect. So, of course, something similar to what Nadia said, trying to divide the companies into different clusters and to see the new SMEs and startups, how are they dealing with the new digital technology, how this could be applied to more established and I would say old style companies, and if it's possible, and see the different evaluation approaches on each one of those clusters with the involvement of a different generation of business owners, if you want to say so, on that analysis, because I think it's quite important to have their view.
So in that first stage, start that conversation, get that dialogue going. Thank you so much. Ricardo, you are moving into the hot seat. Your country will be in charge for the next 6 months. But you personally, I'm elevating you. You're now Charles Michel. You're the council president for a day. What's the one thing you're going to do in this area to, as I say, seize the benefits, mitigate the downsides?
In one day, I will stress how the European digital model is a unique one in the world, is still a winning model. We cannot compare with the Asia and we cannot compare with the United States, because our model is the single one capable of combining respect for individual rights with socio-economic development. That's what I would stress just in one day.
Thank you very much indeed. Andrea, you have the last word. I didn't let you give me a priority at the end of the last panel. So your key priority just before we close in 1 minute, if you would.
For what they said, I would put them in charge. And then I go drink a gin tonic. No, but I would do two things. I would put posters all over the European Commission, all over the European Parliament, all over the European Council, saying two things. The first one, I like everybody to have the same attitude that Riccardo, Cevelina, Nadia, and every one of the speakers had when we approached this panel. Very positive, very enthusiastic. They immediately replied. It was very short notice. Riccardo even doubled the presence of the Portuguese representation, which, if you deal with representation, hardly they reply to emails. So I really have very good hope and positive for the next 6 months if they keep this enthusiasm. And thank you very much for that. This one doing it, but don't think that a law, that a piece of paper can create a European Amazon. To do that, you need less paper, probably, no? So that's poster number one. The attitude, really, this enthusiasm, positivity. Poster, let's say billboard number two, don't jump to conclusion too fast. 10 years ago, we didn't know what Instagram was. Before Facebook, there were other social media. There was Second Life, now it disappeared. Skyscanner didn't exist. Now they help you travel a lot. Don't jump to conclusion thinking because someone is big, they have a monopoly, or don't jump to conclusion thinking that, I mean, yesterday, many big companies unplugged from self-driving cars because it's not happening in the next 2-3 years, it's probably happening in the next 20 years. And maybe with the AI, it's the same. When you get your hands on AI, it's a chatbot that replies. You know, we're very far from a lot of things. So don't jump immediately to conclusion. Let the thing, as Nadia said, let the consumer drive, a young one drive, because maybe in 5 years, it's a completely different world.
Maybe as part of your Thinkathons, you can have people design those posters, precisely how you would get those key messages across. We are out of time. I wish we had longer, but thank you so much to all of you. And thank you to all of you who've been watching for your comments. Thank you for a great discussion. Lots more. This conversation will run and run. That's the purpose of the Thinkathons. And stay tuned, because this is only the start. Through those Thinkathons, there's going to be some really exciting opportunities coming up for all of you to get involved. So please continue to follow using the hashtag Thinkathon and visit the website of ThinkYoung, Do we even need to say that anymore?
No.
So thinkyoung.eu is all we need to say for news about the Thinkathons, for updates on what they're doing. But it only remains for me again to let me, on behalf of the panel, to give you, this is a hybrid, I'm doing the physical applauding. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you to ThinkYoung for hosting us and the fabulous team behind the scenes who put all this together. And
thank you, Jackie. Let me say that because otherwise you cut me. Thank you very much for moderating this and adapting to all our, requests and the speakers asking you questions before and after. And you are wonderful as always.
Always a joy. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.